What's up, guys? Emily here. Just want to go through the portfolio sites that you recently revised and give you some positive, productive feedback on how to keep evolving these sites to their next best place. You will be officially asked to resubmit these in Portfolio 6. A lot will change between now and then, and here's some great sort of insight and feedback about where you should pay some attention between now and then. So we're going to start here with Z. Taking a look at what we see here, we have kind of an icon logo over here and then the name down in this spot. Because this is the header, the identity also needs to be up in this space. So like ZY, it's not iconic in the sense that you can look at this and know who this is without the name just yet. So my recommendation would be to include the name with the icon up here so that you can begin that association and then have the navigation there across the top. There's not much here on the home page, right? You tell us a little bit about that you're into graphic design, video editing, and web design, which is cool, but there's nothing here that sort of showcases any of that. It's like you're telling us, but you're not showing any of it. And so you want to use this high value real estate area to really showcase the most engaging or compelling content that will make people, want to click onto these other pages and explore more. So as I scroll down, I do see some photography here, and then just the ability to show more images. So what I see here is like your Instagram account, which is cool, but it doesn't look like a consistent aesthetic, right? And there's nothing up here that says that you're a photographer. So the inclusion of this, while it's giving us some visual content, there's nothing sort of themed or consistent about what we see here. Scrolling up, going to go to my work. So here we have photography. So now there is even a bit of a more disconnect, right? Because on the home page, you talk about graphic design, video editing, and web design. But under my work, the first thing that you showcase is photography. So if photography is your thing, then you want to put photography on the home page. So scrolling down, and that would make the Instagram feed make a bit more sense down there. This is beautiful work. I love, seeing this here. One thing is that like the content on the page is getting cut off, so you're going to need to go back into your sort of the back end on your Wix designer and make sure that you're pulling all of these elements back into the visible area. We have a couple of videos here, which I'm curious about, but I would love to have a title, a description of each of these works, and then a description of what you did with each. What was your role? Were you the camera operator? Did you do the pre-production work? Were you the editor? Did you do all of those things? The more information that you can provide, the more that you're telling me about your skill set and ultimately what I might be able to hire you for. Another thing is that you say graphic design and web design here, but there's none of that work in your portfolio or a section for that work. So again, another bit of a disconnect in that area. Going to go to the About Me. So here, just a short sort of About Me paragraph. Anytime that you have paragraph text, you want this left aligned, right? So not center aligned, because that makes it a little bit harder to read. Left aligned. And so like you're giving yourself an identity here. You're introducing yourself and saying that you're an international student, but we still don't have any sort of visual of you. You're talking in the first person. We want to be able to kind of attach an image to this. So consider adding, like a headshot, or something, maybe a picture of you doing the type of work. Here we have your resume. I'm going to go ahead and select that. It's going to open up in a new browser window, which is great. And I can appreciate that you have included it as a PDF. But what is stopping you from including this text and building out a page here, a resume page? Because then that way this becomes keyword-rich content, and that someone doesn't have to go the extra step of opening that PDF. Last but not least, we have the contact page here. And you've got your email and then a form. But why should people contact you? What does it take to engage your services? What kinds of projects are you looking to undertake or collaborate with folks on? Give a little bit more direction here to make sure you're getting the kind of touch points that you're looking for. Next up, we're going to take a look at Shayla's site. So we've got the identity front and center. It's been a long night. I've done a lot of reviews, so I apologize for all of the the misspeaking that I'm sure I'm going to be doing. But so here we're looking at Shayla's site, the identity front and center, video editor, creative. We've got your social media accounts. As I hover over them, I can in fact see that they are linking to other locations on the web where we can connect with you, which is great. A lot of times people forget to link these to their personal accounts and they go to Wix accounts, which would be somewhat of a disconnect. When I click on it, I expect to be taken to the social media platform that features your content. As I scroll, one thing I want to highlight is that there's a very small visible window with which to view things. So this is a sticky header, meaning that it stays in place, and this footer is staying in place, which creates sort of this small window for me to see things in. I'd really like it if this footer didn't stay there and that I could see the content as it's coming up on the page. It would give me more of a visible area there to see. We've got this about me and kind of a fun little illustration. I appreciate that, and a little bit of a bio kind of talking about your background and growing up and all the things that you wanted to be. In this case, my suggestion would be, because this is a little bit of dense paragraph text, would be, can you break this up a little bit more? So we have two kind of longer paragraphs here, and as you learned in editing for the web, that people don't necessarily do a bunch of reading online, they do scanning. So can you break this up with headings, subheadings, or bulleted lists, anything like that to kind of help break up the text in that area. So another thing I want to point out is, as we scroll here, the identity of the site is lost. Your name disappears underneath the sticky header. The identity or the logo or the brand of the site should always be in a consistent place up here in the header. And for you, it disappears completely as I scroll down the page. So my suggestion is to go ahead and put your logo or your name up here as well with each of these pages in the navigation. So this is the About page. I'm going to jump to the portfolio. So here we have a few videos. We have a single video and a single logo. So I appreciate that you've included these, but what's missing for me is the contextualization of what you're sharing. So title, description, what did you do for each of these projects? What roles did you play? What software did you use? All of that lets me know, more and more about your skill set, and ultimately then, what I might be able to hire you for to help with on my projects. Jumping next to the blog. So here we've got, a few posts coming in. We've got a couple. It looks like, you're sort of talking about some of your projects and the work that you've been doing, which is cool. Stylistically, this feels like a bit of a disconnect because now we have like this dark background, whereas before everything was kind of light, and things are feeling really boxy, meaning like a container within a container within a container. So we had just this small viewable area, then you made this black area, and then inside the black area we have the post area. I would definitely recommend opening this up and giving yourself more breathing room to work with your content. So under skills, so we have a single Lynda certificate here. Lynda certificates are only as valuable as your ability to demonstrate the skills that you learned in the training, right? So lynda.com is a great learning library, but at the same time, the world at large doesn't know what Lynda is. It's kind of specialized to our industry. And even so, you can press play on a Lynda and walk out of the room. And so kind of more valuable than this certificate is showing us what you can do or what you've learned after this particular training. So keep that in mind as you continue to think about what to include on this site. So instead of showing us that you did SEO foundations, perhaps instead you could apply the SEO techniques to your portfolio site. Last but not least, we're going to go to the contact page, and it's just a simple contact form. And so you say if anybody has any questions or needs anything to get in contact with you, and that you'll respond back. So the way that you have sort of invited people to get in touch doesn't necessarily convey the idea that you're looking to be hired for some of this work. And if that's not the case, then this is a fine way to sort of frame your contact page, or why people could or should get in touch with you. But it's something I want you to be thinking about moving forward for all of you, is what is the purpose of this site? Is the site just to showcase my work to a potential employer someday, or is it because I'm trying to showcase my skills so that people can hire me maybe in a freelance capacity? Everybody's going to have a different answer for that. So, I'm asking you to do the hard work of figuring out what's most relevant for me. Next up, we have Cat Site. So I'm happy to see your brand and the colors that are emerging here. I can appreciate the kind of playful aesthetic, and I enjoy the iconography that you have arranged here. Because of the weight and the sort of the boldness of both the topography here, but also these icons, my eyes are immediately drawn in this direction and pulled away from your brand, right? Like the colors are great and all of that works, but just this is actually kind of, there's more emphasis on this, and I think that it's kind of doing a disservice to your brand because it's drawing attention sort of away from this immediately. Just something for you to think about. I think that the emphasis is in the wrong area here. Kind of scrolling down, we have your resume, a contact form, the call to action of let's work together. This would be apostrophe S here. And then these, right? So like they're icons, but I don't really know where they're going to lead me. Like I wouldn't say that they are meaningfully titled, or that I have a clear picture of where these go, right? So this says imagine, but when I click on it, it goes to the About Me page. So that's a little bit of just like counterintuitive. There's nothing about imagine that would make me think that I go to the About page. So something for you to think about with like the languaging and the architecture, or the navigation of where you're going and why. I appreciate the layout of this page. I love sort of the collage aesthetic, to know a little bit more about you and this background of your story. This is playful and fun, and I think it really fits your personality and the vibe overall itself. There's not much on this homepage aside from these icons. To me, it's sort of a waste of space. This is the high value real estate area. Because this site is about you, Cat, it stands to reason that the information on the homepage would be about you, which means that you don't necessarily need this about page. I would perhaps recommend consolidating the content on this page to get, on these two pages, to get sort of more bang for your buck with that. On the blog, so here we see a single post about drinking around the world. One of the things that we talked about during your final presentation was the idea of whether or not you kind of wanted to separate what's personal and what's professional, like with your life and in your brand. And so, like, I know that a lot of you guys go to a lot of the parks and do posts about different things that would be appealing with various attractions and things like that. I'm not sure I'm not sure about drinking around the world, like how that plays into sort of the professionalism that you want to convey. Just something to think about. Is this, if you want to sort of merge that line between personal and professional, I think this is totally fine. But based on the conversations that we had in class during your presentations, it sounds like it's something that you're giving a lot of intentional and strategic thought to. So, just kind of revisit that. Under portfolio, we've got some of your work here, right? So this is a nice large graphic, and it looks like I can kind of click through these. So here, it's interesting because we get kind of like this cut off or cropped version of this. You see it here in the thumbnail, and then it gets bigger, and you're like, is this it? Like, is this the whole graphic? And it's not really like apparent that I can click on this to make it bigger. Like, my cursor doesn't turn into a hand, but when I do click on it, it lights up in a light box effect, and I can see the whole thing, and then I get to see the title and a bit of context. I'm just not sure that these slideshows, I'm not a fan of the Wix slideshows for this, because it is kind of cropping your artwork in some ways that aren't the best representation. When you want to see the full version of it like this. my recommendation, especially with some of these things where you are having multiple assets for a single project, would just be to like create a page for that project, share all of the assets and show how they work well together. Because here, like, I don't even really get the context. So Lake Worth longboards, and these are stickers, right? But you created this overall brand, which is awesome, and it's cooler to see these things side by side to see kind of the overall branding campaign with all this collateral material instead of kind of piecemeal this way. Um, yeah, we might revisit this in class because I'm seeing a bunch of it on a lot of the sites. But with like these, with your graphics and with your posters or infographics or things like this, these slideshows just aren't going to be the best way to showcase your work and kind of contextualize and let people get a better idea of what you created, why, and how. Overall, this is an awesome site. It's a great start for where you want to be. Your work is on point. I think with a little bit more focus and attention on like content and layout strategy, you can leverage like what you have in a more powerful way. All right, next up we're going to take a look at Trevor's site. So first things first, there's no branding identity up here in the header. We talked a little bit about that on Shayla's site, because as I like move away from this section, like I kind of lose whose site this is. So your name needs to be up here in the header as well. This sort of like light teal or Tiffany blue, green. It's hard. It's a hard color because it looks pretty good over the dark. It looks decent over the white, but kind of in this interim, especially with this background animation, it looks hard. It's the contrast isn't there in certain places. Also, I want you guys to be thinking about, you are media professionals or budding media professionals, getting rid of the stock imagery that are in these templates. There's nothing that screams stock more than, these types of things like, we're not in San Francisco, you're not from San Francisco, so what's the relevancy of this image? Sure, it looks cool, but it's, looking cool on so many other people's sites. And as like a marketing or, even like just as a photographer, you should be pulling your own work and featuring it here on your portfolio site. So here's a little bit of the about me section, kind of outlining what you like to do in terms of media and marketing. What I'll say is that you should never use all caps for paragraph text. It appears sort of more like a word search than something that's easily read, so definitely not all caps here. And then break up this paragraph. It's pretty dense in terms of like the text that you have, so try and break that up in a more readable way. So this says see resume. I click it, but it takes me kind of just to like an about me page. Up here we go. Here's some work experience. It just says sort of Hall of Fame and a few places, that maybe you potentially contributed some of your media to. I'd like a bit more detail about what you did here, right? Because Hall of Fame media, I can understand that as an instructor, but a stranger or a visitor to this site is not really going to understand what that means, right? And what kind of photography did you do for the Valdosta Times? How many times was your work placed, on the website or in the newspaper? There's a lot of like spacing issues here. So like there's a lot of space between these elements, and I would recommend sort of moving things up on the page. Here I can have the chance to download your resume. It looks like that button's not working there, so you'll want to revisit in that area. I was on the home. I went to the about section here, content. As I'm scrolling down, we have create and storytell. I click on create, but nothing happens. Storytell, nothing happens. Branding. All right, so you've kind of, these are areas that you might like to work in, but you have nothing to show for this here. So definitely, if you're sort of advertising that this is what you do, a portfolio site would be the place that you would show that, not just tell it. Additionally, you've created these to kind of look like buttons, so you're kind of promising some sort of interaction here when this is clicked and nothing is delivered, so there's definite disconnect. The other thing too is now we're looking, at a totally different city skyline. So again, I want you guys to be thinking about like what relevance does do the visuals that I'm including on my site have to my overall brand and aesthetic. Scrolling down, we see a few examples of your work here, which are cool. So like if I click on this one, I can see it in its full, dimension. But what I'm looking for also is a title and a description of the work so I can understand, what it is that you've done with these pieces, right? Like, so as I'm looking at the work here, I see that this is an infographic, but I'd like to know more about, like, what's the title of it? What did you use to create it? And get a better understanding of your skill set, right? And your process, really. Got a contact form, simple ways to get in touch. Um, yeah, so I think I've poked through most. That's the resume. We're on that page, and here's the contact form. This is a start. It's definitely a start. It's kind of scattered in that, up here you talk about marketing and photography, but I don't see any photography here, maybe aside from this photo. And I don't see any sort of larger marketing campaigns. I see a few like digital designs. So I really want you to be thinking about like the language that you would use to describe the work that you want to do in your passions. We've had some conversations in class that illuminate, that you're not really loving design, but that you like marketing. We need to talk a little bit more about like what particularly with marketing, because what you showcase on your portfolio needs to be representative of the kinds of work that you want to do out there in the industry. So this is a good start. One thing to note though is that these social media icons are in fact hovering. As I'm hovering over them, I can see that they're going to Wix locations. So that's definitely something that you want to update with your own information if you do in fact want people to be able to connect with you there. Next up, we have Dust in Sight. And so it's kind of being wrapped with his, personal brand identity here. And kind of, we have this, it looks like an advertisement, somewhat follow to watch me play. But kind of play what? Doesn't really, like, it doesn't scream, it doesn't like scream video games or like streaming. Maybe the name of it itself is something that is more indicative of that I just unfortunately don't know enough about. But there's nothing here to me that says like gamer just yet. This is the name or the brand that you're promoting, but then you have like your email address up here, which is kind of totally different. As I hover over these, I can see that like the usernames or the handles are more consistent with what we see here. So, when you're having kind of an identity other than your name, it's going to be important to be consistent. Well, anytime with a brand, it's important to be consistent, but, just so that you can kind of lay the foundation, for what you're trying to communicate about yourself and what you do. One thing to note is that as I scroll, like I lose the identity and the ability to navigate up here at the top. So here I'm on home. If I go to video player, it drops down to this section. It totally skips this about me. One thing to note is that like you're not using this high value real estate area probably in the best way possible, because this about me, which says I'm a aspiring like Twitch streamer and gameplay, that was kind of like what I was saying. I don't really see much about video games, but what if this information, follow to watch me play and Drycore is more kind of aligned over here on the left, and that about me info is over here. That might be a better placement for that instead of sort of this stacked layout where I'm having to just scroll. So it's cool to see there's a link to your Twitch stream. I might make this a little bit bigger and draw a bit more attention to that. We've got your latest video, so that's cool. Wondering about like every time that you have your latest video or you're going to upload it here, is this something that's dynamically pulled in, like it's maybe like a YouTube plugin that puts your latest work? If so, that's awesome. Otherwise, every time you create something new, you're going to have to be updating your website as well. Your CV, so kind of like your resume and professional history. There's not much here. Like, I don't know that I would highlight this. I wouldn't like make a section for it and then only deliver with this little bit of what we see. It's kind of unimportant. Like, it's unimportant to what it is that you're trying to do. Kind of a note for everybody, when I ask you, or any sort of instructor asks you to complete assignment, there's a part of you that's going to be responsible for asking yourself the question of, how is this most relevant to me? right? How is this most relevant to what I'm trying to do? Okay, I get that this instructor is trying to get me to build some sort of online presence that is helpful to me in kind of extending myself in the industry in a way that I want to be present and working and striving for. And it says, potentially at A, B, or C, but I think that, D, E, and F might work better for me. If that's the case, just have a chit chat with your instructor and say, hey, this is what, I think would work better for me or what I'm trying to do. Because ultimately the goal with these things, guys, are not for you to kind of create something textbook the same as everybody else, but to create something that feels like an important and productive tool for you in the career that you want to have, right? So I don't know, all this to say that, Dustin, that your schooling and streaming doesn't really seem to be like that, like important to what you're trying to do here, like with Twitch and your gaming. So I think, to revisit your content strategy and what you share here is going to be important. As we talked about in class, the folks think that your brand is red, black, and white. So I suspect that we'll be seeing some major changes to this in the future. Last but not least, we've got brand insight here. A couple of things. Your identity up here in the header is BR. But I think it should say Brandon Reed, because it's not like this is iconic or some sort of logo. It's just your initials. But BR is also consistently known for like Banana Republic or Baskin Robbins. And so in this sense, because we want to associate your name with the identity of the site, because it is a personal site, I think your name should be up here. Scrolling down, I do see that you're a video editor, but like there's nothing else in this area above the fold, meaning before I start to have to scroll. And kind of because of that, like it's a waste of space. And as much as you haven't shown me anything really compelling at this point, right? I have to click somewhere else or scroll. So, as a video editor, I might think that you would utilize maybe like a video header, right? So you put together a compilation of something that kind of reflects your style in the background here. Scrolling down, I like this picture, right? Like this is really cool. And this is a great layout. It's clean. It kind of talks about you and your aspirations, how you got started. It's just a cool photo. Going to continue to scroll here, just kind of a quote, but like there's not a ton on this page. Under portfolio, you have past creative projects. And again, you have this giant header, nothing visual, just kind of this title for the section. Then I have to scroll to see it, right? And there's one video, two. So there's a few videos, but what's interesting is it's kind of like in a banner format, and I have to click it to get the full video. It auto plays. And, if you can toggle that setting, it's a best practice not to have something autoplay, because you never know when someone, where someone is when they're viewing something. And if all of a sudden it's playing and audio comes on, that could be problematic for folks. It's something you want people to elect to do. You give it somewhat of a title here. But I want a title, a description of the video, and then a full detailing of the roles that you played, the software that you used to edit, or any equipment that you used to film. All of that is going to give me a lot of detail about your skills and abilities, and potentially the value that you could bring to someone else on one of their creative projects. Last but not least, contact, simple form. Your photos are great. Do you do photography? Because this, what you've included is really nice. But so something to note here on this page, it just says BR. It doesn't have like the Brandon Reed up here. So the identity is not really carried through throughout the site. I'm quite pleased with what you've put together. With a few tweaks, this could be, much stronger. You don't share a ton here, and you don't have to share a ton on your portfolio site, because it's a curated experience, meaning hand-picked, selected the best things that I want to show you about myself and my work. You might consider a one-pager whereby you have sort of a reel running here. You've got this About Me section, and then you have featured projects. And maybe you have 3 featured videos here. And then you give me the title, the descriptions, and the roles that you played. Keep scrolling, a little bit of a contact form, and that's a great portfolio site. People get kind of kind of locked into the idea that it has to have this many pages or do this or the other, but really it just has to be the best layout for the content that you have. So, you know, I encourage all of you guys to think about like what works best for the content that I have to share. If you guys have any questions about the feedback provided, let me know. Otherwise, I very much look forward to seeing how these sites evolve between now and the time that you are in Portfolio 6, which is when they pretty much need to be like polished up and ready to go. Thanks, you guys.